Alright, I should probably do this lesson on how to learn chord changes. How to learn to change chords quickly. You know, like that. Most beginners struggle with changing chords because it's challenging at first, but most people could cut the time in half at least if most people just use a more efficient method of learning chord changes. So basically what happens when people learn chords, they're always learning how to put them down one finger at a time, and then they strum it, right? Well, if you go one finger at a time, it's going to take much longer than if you do it all at once. For example, if a chord like C requires 3 fingers, then it's going to take 3 times as long if you go one finger at a time than if you just went all at once, right? Doesn't matter the chord, it's always going to be true. Some chord changes, luckily, you know, like C to A minor, it's only got one finger that changes, really. So you might be able to get away with bad habits there, or with, no, never mind. Yeah, so sometimes you might be able to get away with bad habits, but it's really not an excuse. So if you want to learn chord changes and how to change chords quick, like let's say you always experience issues with like going from C to D, you know, if there's that pause whenever you need to change chords, then you've got issues with chord changes. So forget about strumming, we're just all gonna do downstrokes, 1 strum per chord. And so all you gotta do first is figure out where each finger is going. So let's say we're doing C to D. So where's your ring finger going? It's going from the 3rd fret on the A string to the 3rd fret on the B string. Basically, you gotta make sure your finger can just make the jump fairly well. It doesn't have to be amazing, but you can isolate that jump, that finger's movement, and just sit there with it. So then what's the next one? So we've got the middle finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, and that one's going to the 2nd fret of the E string. So then you just isolate that. Make sure you can do that. You don't have to spend a ton of time, but some amount of time would be good. And then, so where's your index finger going? Index goes from the 1st fret of the B string to the 2nd fret of the G string. So you've got this movement. That one's the easiest probably. Anyways, so that's 1 finger at a time. We're just isolating those movements. Then can we do 2 fingers at a time? So in this case, the ring and the index, or sorry, the ring and the middle finger actually keep the same shape. You can see there that I'm just moving the ring down to the B string from the A string, and I'm moving the middle down from the D string to the E string. So it's the same jump. They both stay on the same fret. You can see this little diagonal line stays the same. So we're just looking for a little patterns where we can keep things simple, because what happens is my hand doesn't change too much. These 2 fingers start working as a 1, and so instead of thinking about 2 movements, I'm thinking about 1 movement. So you can isolate that. Then let's isolate the ring finger and the index finger. So these 2 aren't doing the same thing. So we can move these together, And what you want to focus on is not doing one at a time. You gotta do them at the same time. You want to lift them. You want to have them fretted, and then you lift them so they're just touching the strings, but you can't make any notes with them. They're both dead. And then you lift them at the same time, have them hover over where they're supposed to be. Just gently touch the strings at the same time. Very important. We get those movements together. And then, so we're just touching the strings. They're still dead. And then we push them down at the same time. This is gonna get you used to moving things all at once. You're gonna have to overcome this challenge. If it's very frustrating, which I imagine it is, it's been a while since I worked on this stuff, but I imagine it's pretty frustrating. So 2 fingers at the same time, lift them to they're just touching the strings, then you move them, hover over the strings, touch the strings, they're still not fretted, and then you push down on the strings as light as you possibly can while still achieving a clear note. And look out for any times where you're touching neighboring strings, because that's generally going to be a bad idea, and it's going to cause problems. Like if my index finger touches the D string, it's now dead, and it's touching the D string on the D chord, so that's kind of important. But okay, let's go back. So we got the ring and middle moving together. We got the ring and index moving together, and then we can have the middle and index move together. So remember, same process. We have them together, we lift them to where they're just touching the strings, then we move them over and hover over the new spot, then we touch the strings lightly, and then we push down. It seems a bit excessive, but it'll all fuse into one movement in your head once you get used to it. We're trying to get these into our subconscious, and the best way to do that is learn it right from the beginning. Okay, so then let's see, we've got these 2 fingers, we got these 2 fingers, we got these 2 fingers. That's all of the pairs. So once you got the pairs down, you can go back to just moving the chord all at once. And it's the same thing. Move all the fingers at the same time. We have to break it down into steps. So basically, if you got your C, let's assume that you've worked out all the notes so that every note rings clear. We don't want any of this where my middle finger is now touching the G string, so it can't ring out. You gotta isolate all those problems first. I'm assuming you've already done that, but if you haven't, do it at the same time. So we've got our C. So the process of learning C to D for me would be, first you play the C, and then you lift all the fingers so that they're just touching the string. So only the open strings can ring out now, because I've deadened all the other notes, because it's just lightly touching the strings. Then I'm going to lift all the fingers at the same time and hover them above the new chord shape. So in this case, I've got it over D. It's just hovering there. And then I'm going to lightly touch the strings. Still dead, but I'm making sure that no problems are about to arise. I'm making sure, like with my index finger, that I'm not going to accidentally touch this D string with it, right? I want it to just be ready without, I want it to be ready and know that it's not about to cause some problems. So same with the ring finger here, I want to make sure it's not going to lay down and touch the E string, because then I won't get that note. we want them all to be nice and clear. So, again, play our C, we lighten up our grip so that all the frets that we're touching, all those strings are dead. Then we lift all the fingers at the same time and hover above the new shape. You make sure there's not any issues about to happen. Then lightly touch your fingers to the strings so that if you were to play them, they'd be dead. Then you just push down lightly and you have your chord. You shouldn't be squeezing super hard. You don't even need your thumb to squeeze. It's all really just coming from my arm pulling back lightly. Like, it's really, it takes basically no effort to do this. But then, you know, once you get the process down, it's going to start looking like this. But make sure to catch yourself anytime you start building your chords like this. You see, I'm moving each finger individually, and so if I'm moving 3 fingers, it's going to take 3 times as long. We need to move them all at once. And it seems like a daunting task at first. It's very frustrating. But then one day you're just going to notice it's effortless. So once you get the process down and you're not doing them all 1 finger at a time, then all you're going to do is go back and forth between the 2 chords, strumming each once, just once. Because if we waste time working on throwing in the strumming patterns, like I'm barely changing chords. I'm mostly just working on strumming at that point. So we just want to isolate the chord change and work on that. See, I can get in like 10 chord changes in the same time it took me to do like 3 chord changes just by doing this. And then you can start multitasking. You know, you can watch TV and do this at the same time. As long as you're not making any mistakes. If you're making a bunch of mistakes, don't multitask. But once you've got it, then you can start putting in your subconscious by multitasking or directing your focus to something else. Yeah, that's basically it. I would apply the same process if I was going through some chord change. Like let me think of something. Let's do that one. It's the same process. These are jazz chords, and I'm muting all the open strings always, but the same process would apply. You know, I've got this. I'm just gonna lift up my fingers slightly. My fingers tend to twitch if I do this, so I get how frustrating it can be. So you lift up your fingers so you can't play the chord, and you move them all at once. They just kind of make the general shape above the strings, but I'm actually not touching the strings, and then I'm going to lightly touch them to the strings where they would be, and then push down and make sure there's no issues. Like you heard, I was accidentally fretting that at first. It's just because I'm in a weird position. So then I've got my E flat 9. Sounds good. All the open strings are dead. So then I'm good to start over the process. I lift slightly. I guess it's more, I'm releasing the pressure. release the pressure, move them to the new chord shape, just hover over it, lightly touch, still dead, and then make sure there's no issues about to arise, and then I just push down as lightly as possible to get the chord. And it's always good to go through the chord one string at a time to check and make sure every note is the way you want it to sound. It should not sound like, because I'm missing half the chord. Anyways, so yeah, that's the process. And then you would just isolate those chord changes. Anytime I've been rusty on gypsy jazz and needed to go play a gig, I spend a lot of time doing this, just working on changing between two voicings, specifically two voicings. Yeah, and then, you know, just try to build up your speed. See, that one wasn't super good. Anyways, so that's the process. Some other things to consider are chord changes where certain fingers don't have to move, or the shape is exactly the same. So let's start with when most of the notes don't change. So A minor to C is a good example. So you've got the only finger that moves from C to A minor is your ring, because it comes from the 3rd fret on the A string to the 2nd fret on the D string, or the G string, sorry. So that one, in a case like that, you really don't want to waste energy by picking up these fingers when they're just going to go back down to the same spot. So we're just going to keep them there. So you really want to just work on picking up this finger by itself without lifting any of the other fingers in both cases. It's probably pretty tricky at first. Like I said, I don't remember how it was. But it's not exactly true to say that the ring finger is the only one that moves, because I do actually shift down. I tend to shift down my middle finger a little bit just to make room so that I can squeeze in this ring finger. Because when it's up here, I can push my middle finger right up against the fret, but then when I come down here, there it's in focus. Yeah, so you can see the middle finger is right up against the fret, but then when I come down and push my ring finger in there, I need a little extra room, so it does shift slightly, but that's about it. Just make sure you can do them as quick as you need. You know, you're gonna need some speed for chord changes to not interrupt your strumming. That's why we just isolate the chord change itself. So then the next circumstance to talk about is when the shape is exactly the same but the strings change. So for instance, going from A minor to E, we get this. The shape does not, here I'll lift my pinky so you can see better. The shape doesn't change, but the strings do. You can see I'm just lifting the same shape with this, the process is the same as going from C to D. You know, we figure out every movement that has to happen, but they're all the same. So if you want to go finger by finger, you can. It's kind of pointless. So you don't have to spend a ton of time on that, but I would work on the little pairs where you can do like the middle and ring at the same time. It should feel like one movement. You really shouldn't feel your fingers separating at all. They should pretty much just feel like they're glued together. Maybe glue your fingers together to work on this one. But same with, you could do middle and index. Now, in this case, they're not smushed together, but it should still feel like one movement. And same with ring and index, one movement. You know, you lift, hover over the next one, lightly touch, push down. That's it. And I'm not even going to do all the pairs. You just move on to the whole chord change, right? It should just feel like you've got this shape and your hand just kind of keeps it. You know, it's like you can just hold it in the air and just push down somewhere. You know. Yeah, that's how you learn chord changes. That's about it. It's probably really frustrating at first, but even people that learn it the wrong way, you know, they tend to get it eventually, where it just becomes effortless. But this speeds up the process immensely. And just remember, if you're always changing chords like this, sorry, I started changing chords the right way while trying to demonstrate the wrong way. Yeah, if you start changing chords one finger at a time, you're never going to be able to play the songs you want to play. So you might as well deal with the frustration, because it doesn't last very long, and then you'll be able to do what you want to do. And like I said, it applies to any chord change. There are rare exceptions where the process doesn't really work. I'm not going to go into them though, because they're so rare. It doesn't even matter. You can see I'm still doing the same thing, except all the little steps just fuse into one, and then you're just moving everything at the same time. That's it for this one.